Hello, so glad to have you. Welcome back to this digital learning how-to series designed to help teachers become experts at digital learning. This is lesson 5, dealing with classwork. Because lesson 5 is such a big topic, I've broken it into a few different videos, and this is the very first one, just an introduction to classwork. Before we get into these 5 topics, I want to remind you how to get to the classwork tab. In any particular class, like this practice class, the list of tabs up at the top gives you the opportunity to see which part of Google Classroom you're going to look at. The second one is the Classwork tab. The heart of the Classwork tab is this plus Create button. Clicking that brings up the options menu with 4 different types of classwork that you can assign, as well as the ability to reuse a post or to produce a topic. In addition, this Classwork tab has this little ribbon with 3 shortcuts that takes you to different parts of the Google Suite. And we can see just one of the topics, these headers, these organizers that Google Classroom gives us the opportunity to produce in our Classwork tab. I want to point out that the student view is very similar, except that they don't have the ability to create work. Instead, that button is replaced with this View Your Work button. That's a great tool for students, so I encourage you to train them to look for that. That gives them the opportunity to see all the work that they have done, the work that has been graded, and the work that they still need to do. I also want to point out for you that work that has not yet been completed is colored, whereas work that is already completed or doesn't require any response from the students is grayed out, like this week 1 material. With that being said, let's introduce those 5 topics for the Classwork tab. The first one is types of classwork. Again, when you click the plus Create button, you have the opportunity to produce one of 4 different types of classwork: an assignment, a quiz assignment, a question, or a material. You also have the opportunity to reuse a post or to create a topic, which is what Google names these organizational headers that you can group work into. We'll talk in more detail about each of those, but I want to briefly introduce for you what each one of those assignment types or types of classwork is like. The first one is an assignment. In most cases, you're going to have students produce some kind of written work in an assignment. However, the assignment is very flexible. So you could just ask a question and get students to type their response. You could give students a template document and get them to edit that document. You could have them assign some pages in their textbook and write out responses. Say that might be really useful in math, where, for example, you want them to show their work, and then they take a picture of their assignment and turn it into you. That assignment also has the ability to be very broad in the type of assignment that you give. So maybe you could have them produce a video response or find some resource. Maybe the task could be kind of like a digital hunt where they've got to find a best resource, a video that explains something really well, or a map that shows some battlefield or something like that. The next 2 types of classwork are a little bit narrower. The second one is this quiz assignment, and I think of that most often as an assessment. The heart of that is a Google form that collects responses from each student, and you can assign point values to those as well. The third type is a question, and it does what the name says. It asks one question. Now, you could use that as a survey just to get some feedback from your students. You could use it for taking attendance. You could use it as an exit ticket at the end of a lesson, or you could broaden that a little bit. You have the capability of letting students see one another's responses, so you could use that question as a discussion board starter. The last type of classwork is not one that students have to respond to. It's called the material, and it gives students the opportunity to have curated resources that you've organized and shared for them in an organized way. The next topic deals with attachments and options when you create this classwork. When you create classwork, you have the opportunity to add, and there's 4 different types of attachments that you can add. You can have a Google Drive document, a link to anything on the web, a file from your computer that's not a Google Drive document, or you could go directly to a YouTube video. If you want to share something with students and you don't have that file already created, but you want it to be part of the classwork, you can create it during the process of creating that classwork. You can click plus, create, and you can choose a doc, a slide, sheets, drawings, or forms. Whenever you do include an attachment, if that attachment is a Google Drive file or a Microsoft Word file, you have the opportunity to change the permissions. And I encourage you to be paying attention to this permissions chooser. By default, it says students can view file, but clicking this little drop-down triangle brings up three options. And one that I find myself using very often is make a copy for every student. That's a really useful choice. It kind of does what the name might indicate. It's like taking a digital file, but then taking it to the photocopier and making a different one for every student. And that's really, really useful in many cases, depending on the assignment type that you are giving for students. Whenever you do create classwork, you have to choose a number of details about that classwork, who it's going to be for, whether one class or more than one class. If you choose just one class, you have the opportunity to choose all students, that's the default, or to narrow that down. You can choose how many points it's worth, when it's due, what topic it belongs to. And remember, when they say topic here, they're talking about the organizational header that it belongs under. And then rubrics and plagiarism checker are options as well. In addition, this assign button allows you to get that classwork to show up for students. But in addition to assign, you have the opportunity to schedule that so it shows up later. The next topic that we'll look at is dealing with what Google calls topics and organization. I'm going to switch to my live class for just a second, and I want to show you the topics and organization. So here's one topic, I called it class guidelines. Here's a second topic, I called it week 1. That's a way of grouping these assignments. Within that topic, you can move classwork around. So you could, for example, move this question down or up within that group. You can take an entire topic and change where it fits on the page. So for example, you could take this blank week 3 and move it to the top if that met your needs. So you can organize what students see and the order in which it's presented to them by choosing to create topics, or by changing the order of those topics on the page. You've got lots of options to keep stuff organized for your students. My suggestion is that you have one topic that stays at the top that's kind of your general class guidelines, resources that students might need throughout the year. You keep that at the top, and then after that you keep those topics arranged by time frame. For secondary, I think 1 week is a great time frame. For elementary, it seems like 1 day works well because that one teacher will assign them 1 day's work, but they've got a number of different subjects that they're teaching. And I like to have those organized with newest stuff at the top for my students. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about best practices and maybe just some ideas. So these are just my ideas, but I encourage you to use the tools that Google Classroom includes to keep track of stuff. Don't forget that to review, the gradebook, and the upcoming panes, as well as filters to make sure that you can keep up with student work. And I encourage you also to train students to use that to do, view your work, the calendar, and the upcoming tools in Google Classroom, as well as those visual cues. Remember, work turns gray when they don't need to do anything more with it. Either it's a material they don't have to do anything with, or they've already completed it. So train them to identify work that they still need to do so they don't miss out on anything. Here at Killing Hill, we'll probably have students that are online as well as in person. I encourage you to keep those on track. Keep the due dates and the assignments exactly the same in class and online. I just encouraged you to keep that resources at the top of your classwork tab that's going to persist all year, and then organize stuff chronologically below that. And I like to have the newest stuff at the top. One other thing that I'll share with you guys is I like to use a weekly summary document that gives students a whole week overview of what's going to be due for them. And here's just a screenshot of that from back in May from one of my classes. I like to be really clear about what's due when, and kind of organize it. And I like to make it kind of like a checklist for students so that they could go through and know what they have done and what they still need to do. Finally, I encourage you guys to broaden your scope a little bit. You can still assign group work. And one of the ways, and we'll talk about this when I talk about reusing assignments, is by reusing assignment and assigning the first version to one set of students and the second version to another set of students. And then just encourage you to be creative. Some of these digital tools will actually open up new possibilities, kind of remove the rails of what's possible. So encourage you to be creative in the assignment type that you give to students. You might have students able to do things that they were never able to do before by having some of these digital assignments. So I hope you're more familiar now with types of classwork, attachments and options, the details pane, topics and organizations, and best practices. And we'll go into a little bit more detail in future videos about each of those. God bless your efforts as you're trying to teach students through this digital format.